Okay, today's lesson is Deborah, a leader in a national emergency. And our first unit has four stories of the Old Testament women and men who, by their words and action, show us God's love and his forgiveness. Now, our lesson guide asks us, how would we describe an ideal leader? And in our text, I'm going to read, if I can find it. I had it out here so I wouldn't lose it, and I promptly lost it. Ah, here we go. Our scripture is from Judges 4, verses 4 through 10, 14, 21 through 22. At that time, Deborah, a prophet, wife of Liphidoth, was judging Israel. She used to sit under a palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. And the Israelites came up to her for judgment. She sent and summoned Barak, son of Abinoam. I'm not good on this Old Testament, from Kadesh, and said to him, the Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, position yourself at Mount Tabor, taking 10,000 from the tribe of Naphtali and the tribe of Zebulun. I will draw out Sisera, the general in Jabin's army, to meet you by the Wadi Kishon with his chariots and his troops, and I will give him into your hand. Barak said to her, if you will go with me, I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go. And she said, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the road on which you are going will not lead to your glory, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. Then Deborah got up and went with Barak to Kadesh. Barak summoned Zebulun and Naphtali to Kadesh, and 10,000 warriors went up behind him, and Deborah went up with him. Then Deborah said to Barak, up, for this is the day on which the Lord has given Sisera into your hand. Has not the Lord gone out before you? So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 warriors following him. But Jael, wife of Heber, took a tent peg and took a hammer in her hand and went softly to him and drove the peg into his temple until it went down into the ground. He was lying fast asleep from weariness, and he died. Then, as Barak came in pursuit of Sisera, Jael went out to meet him and said to him, come, I will show you the man whom you are seeking. So he went into her tent, and there was Sisera lying dead with a tent peg in his temple. What bad manners. If you go home today and there's a mallet and near where your wife is, you better worry. So that's the lesson today of this verse. Now, the lesson guide asks us, how would we describe an ideal leader? And
definitely not a one who can drive a tent.
well, let's put it this way: it certainly got his attention. And briefly. So, how would we describe an ideal leader? How does an ideal leader inspire us? What traits does an ideal leader have? And how would an ideal leader help us if we're faced with an emergency? Now, there's one example that jumped to my mind because I was in school, and it scared the living fire out of me when it happened. This was the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. And the Soviet Union had put missiles in Cuba in Castro's Cuba, and a missile launched from Cuba could hit Washington or New York, about 5 minutes? And so it really had an impact on the Cold War and how to deal with that crisis. I remember being at Chapel Hill at the time, and all the dorm rooms would be open with the radios blaring because we knew as soon as the Russians uh, were going to Cuba to unload even more weapons, and Kennedy had put a blockade around Cuba to stop anybody trying to bring in arms. We knew that as soon as we tried to stop a Russian ship, there'd be shooting, and there went the ball game. There could be a nuclear war to be touched off very quickly. It was a frightening time. Do you remember that time? Yeah. And it was scary. There's no doubt about it. Nobody knew exactly what was going to happen. And
I remember going up to this little town in Kentucky. There we are, in the classroom, searching the skies, being told how to get under our desks. That was going to help.
I was sitting in Mr. Bost's art class.
I'm sure you were the best
student. Remember his
Yeah, I'll tell you. Well, listen, if you see the flash, of light, we used to joke, get down in a squatting position and kiss your own rump goodbye because it would be bad. The New Yorker had a joke, showed two golfers out on the range, and in the distance of the atomic bomb going off, and one golfer says to the other one, it'll be 15 seconds before the shock ray waves hit us. Go ahead, putt. So, okay, what are some of the ideal traits of a leader? And in the Cuban Missile Crisis, that was a frightening time. And we knew that as soon as those ships hit that quarantine line that Kennedy had put into place, they'd be shooting unless they let us examine the ship and make sure there was no offensive weapons being moved into Cuba. And everybody was glued to their television sets or to the radios. All the dorm doors were open, seeing what was happening. There was an argument going on in the UN about it, and we were frightened. We thought, this could be it. Now, I really got scared. I was dating this girl at the time from Fayetteville, outside Fort Bragg. And so, I took her out to the Rathskeller, a beer and then oblivion. And I said, are you going home? And she said, I called my parents and asked if they want me to come back to Fayetteville. And they said, no, you're safer in Chapel Hill. They're dispersing the troops out of Bragg. Now, that's when I got scared, when something was going to happen bad. And but luckily it got solved, and they removed their missiles from Cuba, and the crisis really ended. There's some good things that have been done about that. Bobby Kennedy wrote an account of it. He kept an account on several legal pads, and as the events would happen, he'd write them up because he didn't want to forget them. And he didn't think he wasn't going to release these notes until after his death. He hadn't counted on dying so soon. He was assassinated, 68? And but that's a chilling account. It's called it's been published. 13 Days is the title to it. And it really wakes us up to how really close we came to perhaps getting into a nuclear war. There've been some other, yes.
Talk about leadership. There is a book that I read about the relationship on ex-presidents.
Yes.
And at this time, John Kennedy said, whoa, baby, I'm in over my head. I don't know what to do. And this is fact.
Yeah.
And so he called on Eisenhower. And Eisenhower spent about a month with him, but the candidate softened him up, told him how to address him.
Yeah.
Because who else was he going to turn to?
Yeah. Eisenhower would have been the perfect one, 5-star general. I'll tell you, he would.
But history doesn't know a lot about that. Yeah, Eisenhower said, hit them first, hit them fast.
Yeah, yeah. Nixon told him just find some pretext and invade. That was Nixon's solution to it. Cuba. So, but they were frightening times, a national emergency. How do we deal with it? And the personalities involved. Kennedy, it said, ask all the right questions of the different people that were brought in on what to do, because the Russians had missiles that were very close to our shores, and they could have hit Washington, 5 minutes notice, and something had to be done. What was to be done? And so a number of people, gave him advice and everything, but luckily it got solved.
To the point about a great leader, in Kennedy's case, he was smart enough to know what he didn't know. And he
Right.
was smart enough to seek advice. Where a lot of quote unquote leaders don't have that intelligence.
I'll tell you.
Well, that's the humility. Right.
Yes.
He'd been humble,
Yeah.
made pigs,
Uh-huh.
you know.
He said that the military told him just sign on the dotted line and everything would be all right, and it wasn't. Oh gosh.
I think a good leader surrounds himself with people who have better knowledge than they do and take good counsel.
Right. Right.
And also don't surround yourself with less.
Yeah.
And that's where we disagree with you. Especially.
Yeah. Kennedy wanted to hear from the people around him what they actually thought. They didn't want any posturing, at a cabinet meeting or anything else. We wanted to know genuinely what they felt. But he was able to get through it. But it was a frightening thing. Khrushchev backed down and moved the missiles. There was another factor in it. We had antiquated missiles in Turkey. The Russians were trying to get something out of this. You remove those, they were scheduled to be removed anyway. But Kennedy reached the conclusion that he couldn't do it under pressure, that he was going to do it 6 months from then. They had already scheduled it, but he didn't want to look like that they had switched something, because at some future point there would be something that they couldn't switch, and then we'd be back right where we started, even in a worse situation than they'd been before. So it's a frightening thing. So those are the some things. Can you think of any other national emergency that's been? We've had them before. I'll tell you the one though, that 1962 incident really that cured me. I'll tell you, it was frightening. I remember being in the car on the road back to Chapel Hill, about Greensboro, when it was announced that Kennedy was leaving Chicago and that it had something to do with missiles or having to do with Cuba. And that started the 13 days, I guess. And they had pictures on television of people standing in line outside churches going to pray for what they thought would be the last opportunity they'd have to pray before there was a nuclear war. It was scary. There's no doubt about it.
Netflix series on Abraham Lincoln.
Yes.
And after his election, before he even got to Washington, the country was so divided that he had to take a train route up around, come down to New York to Washington. Because in every city that he was going to, they were looking to assassinate him. So before he ever took office in Washington, he had a crisis of his hand. He didn't want it.
Boy.
And he surrounded himself with the three people that were running against him, president of the different party. He made them his cabinet to help deal with the crisis. Because he thought they had more knowledge than he did. So he surrounded himself with people who knew more about things than he did.
Right. if you've gone to Washington, an interesting place to visit is Ford Theater. You can walk up the steps, go into the box where Lincoln was, where he was shot by John Wilkes Booth, see it all. And in the basement, there's a mannequin with the clothes that Lincoln was wearing that night. Mary Lincoln had given it to the chauffeur, and he'd had it stored in Greensboro in a safe deposit box, and then later gave it to the government. And so you go down to the basement of Ford Theater, and you have a mannequin with glass in front of it to the floor, and you can stand in front of it and see how tall Lincoln was in relation to your height. And he was tall. I mean, he was really tall. And yeah, you see some things, to go up the steps to the presidential box in Ford Theater and see where all this happened. It's chilling. There's just no doubt about it. So, the ideal leader, how would you describe it? A person who's cool under fire, would intelligence be enough? Somebody asked Napoleon how he would select his marshals, that is, who would lead the troops, the different parts of his army, and the qualifications. And Napoleon said only one thing: I want somebody who's lucky. So, oh goodness. So, Oleg Penkovsky was, I'd say, a double. And so he was in on what was happening in the Kremlin, and Colonel Penkovsky. And Kennedy had to know what Khrushchev would do in enforcing the blockade, whether Khrushchev would go to war, whether he would go ahead and touch off a nuclear war. He had to know. But by contacting Penkovsky, that's the same as pointing him out as a double agent. And of course, that's what happened. Penkovsky told him that no, the U.S. had a 10-to-1 missile superiority over the Soviet Union. There's no way that Khrushchev could go ahead and touch off a nuclear war to his disadvantage. And of course, that cost Penkovsky his life because they knew exactly, all the people senior in government were under surveillance. So Penkovsky was later shot and killed, for being a traitor. Scary times, scary times. Now, we're talking about a judge in early Israel. Now, before Israel had kings, there were judges, and a judge would bring together what had been done, collection of tribes. And Deborah is described as an agent who delivers a divine word, a person who fulfills a role of a prophet. In today's lesson, Sisera is killed, fulfilling God's purpose. Now, how would you describe Deborah in the account? She has a prophetic vision. She has confidence in God, and she has confidence in God's divine agency, which overcame Barak's resistance. Now, the difficult thing in the lesson today is what lessons do we draw from the text, from what Deborah does? We know that human history is marked by violence, war, expressions of competing interest. And when you look on the international stage, even today, look what's happening in Iran. What is this Strait of Hormuz and other things that are going on in the world today. There are conflicts, and the idea is to avoid the violence if it's all possible. And human history is marked with violence, war, and an expression of competing interest. Our interest in the Middle East is different from Iran's. or from some of the other Arab states that are there. Now, how do we know we're serving as agents of God's will and not just our own opinion, what we want to do? How do we know? In our lesson today, the story of Deborah, Barak, and Jael invites us to recognize that God works through unexpected ways. And God's time is not our time. It's what God decides.
So a great leader is one that seeks God's direction.
That would be certainly good. Lincoln, said that, the crises that Lincoln had to face in the Civil War. We lost 5,000 men, I think, on a single afternoon at Cold Harbor. And Lincoln said, what on earth will a company think? And he said that sometimes he was driven to his knees, to pray because events had become so terrible. And we lost more men in the Civil War, the fight between North and South, than all of the other wars combined. There was nothing like it. How many people have visited any of the Civil War battle sites? Anybody? Yeah, great. What, Gettysburg? What are some of the others?
Wilderness, Chancellorsville,
Antietam?
Amart, Antietam.
Oh, great. Yeah, absolutely. And
Shiloh was 20,000.
20,000.
It was on Jeopardy this week.
20,000. Golly, Pete.
Get it right.
They said, oh, good God, the slaughter was goodness. And you had to walk over some of the battlefield sites. In Gettysburg, you can go to where Joshua Chamberlain stood, when he made the decision to rush down the hill towards the Alabamans that were trying to break in between the Round Tops and the center. And they'd had a clear path to Washington. God, there's so much. Just when you stand on a site like this and you think what happened on it, it's hard to describe your emotions. You can stand where Robert E. Lee was on his horse watching all this. And when he ordered the men to charge the Union center and it failed, Lee went out to meet the men coming back, the ones that had survived. And Lee said, this was all my fault. I'm the one that did it. It was my fault. I'm sorry. He knew immediately, what had happened. But that was it. And going over some of these sites, you feel, you feel something that's hard to describe. And another site that I think commands a great deal of respect and prayer is the Vietnam War Memorial. And it's there close to the Lincoln Memorial. And it's shaped like an elongated V where you go down a path and then up to the other side. And on the wall is chiseled the names of every single last soldier who died in the Vietnam War in the order that it happened. And it's just, there's a quiet. And you see some of the people. I remember there was an older woman, it's like she was reaching out to touch one of the names. It must have been
Not
his
many
gun.
people go with a piece of paper and pencil and they try to trace their names down.
Right.
Family does. And that's
Yeah.
kind of very sad to see trying to trace their own children, their grandchild. I don't know how they were related to them, but that's their way of remembering it.
Yeah. It has an effect.
Normandy, today was the 82nd anniversary of D-Day.
I'll
If
bet.
you've ever stood there on the other side, that's quite common.
Wow.
Well, while we're here in Sunday school, you want money in the water, whose side is God?
God is on God's side.
Like you said, that really, whose side is God?
God's side. God decides.
But you just read from the Bible there earlier, it says, never said, I'll go if God goes with me. Otherwise, I won't go.
Mm, yeah. We always think that he surrounds us with his love, and he's there for us through thick and thin, good and bad, whatever happens.
We
Oh,
also have another site that's in walking distance of this church. There for visit national city
oh yeah.
and understand what their stand on steels. Those 7 trenches where the prison was born. Something monuments that they're honored. States that place the monuments.
Yeah. Oh, mercy.
Sobering.
It really is. Um, my great grandfather was a soldier in the Confederate Army, and since Salisbury was his home, whenever he was on furlough, he would visit here. And he had friends who were guards at the prison, the Confederate prison. And there's one image, he said you could smell the place before you ever saw it. So you had what? How many? 10,000 men packed in that place. Uh, it's fullest. Uh, he said the conditions were just incredible. Little thin stream ran through the prison stockade. Situation was desperate. Now, if you go down Hoorah Street, cross the railroad track, there's a house up on a hill. In the front yard, there's like a dogwood tree. That was the end. That dogwood tree is placed over the hole, which was the end of the escape tunnel that prisoners in the Confederate dug to get out of there. And they were going to get out and then walk down the railroad track to the Union lines in western North Carolina. But the Confederate prison was really nothing to brag about. It had been an old textile mill Chambers had owned, and with a wooden stockade built around it. But there's not anything really left of the prison. I think they found they did some digging and found the place where the 2 columns were at the entrance to the prison. I think they found that. But other than that, so that was a terrible, terrible place. Andersonville was probably worse across the border, in Georgia. So, yeah, the Civil War was a terrible thing. Well, listen, anybody else have any comments or about the subject of our lesson today? Well, let us stand and be dismissed with prayer that wait. Yeah, oh, hey, what did I forget? El dinero habla. Give generously so we won't have to send the boys around in box truck pick it up. They get carried away sometimes. So dig deep so the boys won't have to.